Previously just white. So I am a senior principal at white at Newday. I am a senior principal at white at Newday. I am a senior principal at white at Newday. I am a senior principal at white at Newday. I am a senior principal at white at Newday. I am a senior principal at white at Newday. I am a senior principal at white at Newday. I am systems thinking, oh, there's going to be loads of code. Sorry, I haven't done code in a while. Used to work with Stephen, he'll tell you why. No, it's not that bad. But today I'm going to be talking about some experience I've had, a lot of experience I've had working with various systems, both in large companies, smaller companies, various different ages, etc. But something that they all have in common is they have a lot of character, to put it politely. They might be a bit older, they might be new, but somebody wrote it in a technology just to learn it. It might be that they were written in certain time constraints, but nobody really understood them, nobody really liked working on them. And I come in and try and make them more stable and make it so that people enjoy working on these systems. So because I've felt the pain, I'm going to share some of the things I've learned about doing these kind of projects so that you don't have to feel the pain yourself. So there's 5 parts to this. These things can be done in sequence, they can be done at the same time. And I may be a little bit shaky because there's a couple of people here who've worked with me. So you might recognize some of the content on my slides. Please don't take me to court. So we'll go through understanding, measurement, prioritization, communication, and something that I might do during this talk, making mistakes. But first of all, we'll talk about understand. And before I launch into this, you may have noticed that I'm using Comic Sans on my slides. And this is not to trigger you first thing and make your day worse. It's actually part of the understand piece. So all of my slides are in Comic Sans and Calibri. This is because they're a dyslexia-friendly font. And it's handy if people can read what I'm presenting. It's considering an audience that doesn't have the same sort of needs as I do in order to follow what I'm talking about. And this is important for this section. So you've seen from this title, I have this word pre-loved. Legacy is now a dirty word. It's no longer a fact that you leave a legacy when you leave a company, and it's a good thing. If you've left a legacy, people are probably cursing your name for the next few years. Which is why I like to use the term pre-loved instead. Because at some point, there was a team, there was a person who worked on this system. They didn't go out and code this to make your life worse. Like, there's always the adage that you should code like the next person who touches your code is a serial killer who knows your address, right? A few faces popped up in my head then, that's really bad. But nobody codes in a way that is to hurt anyone. They might have time constraints. It might be that they have the product owner from hell who's going, features, features all the time. You cannot do any tech debt. It might be that they picked a technology that was right for the time, but is awful now. That's fine. But they put effort into it, and they might be sitting on the desk next to you. So when you're sitting there going, oh my God, who did this? Try not to offend the person who might know your address and might be a serial killer who's smart enough to get away with it. We're in technology, there are not stupid people around. So instead, I use the word pre-loved, because it was loved once. Maybe we can make it loved again. And language is very important. So I've talked about using the terminology to try and increase the level of empathy with people. It's not a legacy thing that, you know, we're going to hate and everyone's going to hide in the cupboard and don't talk about it until the boss notices that we're using a lot of money on Service Fabric all of a sudden. Instead, you use your words to make it sound like it is something that we need to improve. But also, we are terrible for jargon in technology in general. I hardly understand what most people are saying half the time. And it's my job to. If it's got 2 Ds, it's good. I've got that far. So TDD, BDD, DDD, all these things are good things, and we should like those. But then, one of my favorite things, technologically wise, to describe this, is if I say integration test, and ask each of the people in this room for their own definition of what an integration test is, I bet 2 of you will agree. It's the thing that comes up in every single place I've worked is, oh, we do integration tests. But what are they actually doing? Oh, it might be using mocks, it might be using a real thing, it might not be even testing an integration, but that's what they call them. We're using the same words to mean different things. To take this right back to basics, pants. In the UK, pants is underwear. In the US, pants is trousers. No pants, no service leads to an entirely different check depending on which country you're in. So language is important. We have to be able to understand each other to be able to work on the systems together and do a good job of it. I will come back to that. So the next thing that we need to understand as part of working on these systems is understanding the domains. I'm changing a word because domains is another one where everyone means a different thing when they talk about them. I've found this quite recently, particularly when you're talking to non-engineers and trying to describe domain. Domain is actually quite a hard thing to describe if you haven't been working with them for a while. So instead I like to talk about the product, because at the end of the day, these domains do root back to business products. And product is something that everybody in your business should understand. So we're going to talk about understanding the product, which is going to be key to helping understand and stabilizing these systems going forward. Another analogy. I like analogies. Sorry. So let's say you've got a jigsaw puzzle from a boot sale, a charity shop. Hasn't come with a lid. You're trying to put all the pieces together. There might be pieces that are missing. You might have pieces from different jigsaw puzzles and not know about it. You might be trying to jam a piece into a place thinking that it's about right, but actually you haven't got it correct. This is a mistake I have made numerous times when somebody's gone, hey, here's some services. What are they doing? Again, a large part of my job. And I've gone into the code, I've read it, I've gone, okay, so this thing talks to that thing, I think this piece goes here. But this is a lot of hard work, and you're going to make a lot of mistakes if you approach it from the tech up. Instead, you need the picture for the jigsaw puzzle. If you've got the full if you've got the full picture for what this jigsaw puzzle is trying to create, then you know when you've got missing pieces, when you've got pieces that you're just trying to jam in that you really shouldn't be. So what does a picture mean in terms of working with technical systems? It's your product. Unfortunately, and I am really, really sorry, this involves speaking to people. I know it's not our favorite bit of the job, but sometimes it just has to happen. And the people you're going to be talking to are your users and stakeholders. So there's a few different groups here. You've got your product owner. If you are lucky, and try not to look at Stephen because he knows exactly what I'm talking about when I'm referring to this, you might have a product owner who's worked on these systems and on these products for a while. If you're unlucky, they won't be in the company anymore. And that makes the problem a lot harder. But hopefully you have a product owner, a product manager who has an idea of what these systems are used for. You need to talk to your users, if possible, the people who are actually interacting with your system, with these products. Not always possible, but really handy data if you can get it. Your stakeholders. We'll talk a little bit more about stakeholders later on, but these can be internal, external. I'm talking to a lot of people who work at BGSS. You're going to be very familiar with stakeholders, so I won't go too much into this. But again, they're going to have certain things that they want to know about the product and how it's working. And if you're really, really, really lucky, contact points. So people who are working in sales, they're going to be selling your product, they're going to know what people want from it. Your call center, they've got people moaning at them all day on what's gone wrong, they're going to know what might need fixing. And the things you want to talk to them about are key performance indicators, so how do you know that the thing is performing as the company expects? How it's being used, because not every bug is a bug, sometimes a bug is a feature, particularly for internal systems. I have fixed something and then heard the screams from upstairs because contact couldn't do their job. And common issues, so what are the things that keep coming up that you might need to fix? Some handy techniques for these. I'm not going to go too much in depth because these are entire talks in themselves. I will provide resources at the end of the talk though. But capability mapping and event storming are two that I use a lot. There's also domain-driven storytelling as well, which are quite highly related to these. Big fan, haven't done it a lot yet myself, but primarily I use capability mapping and event storming. Capability mapping I use to help identify the domains and the products, bounded context, yes I'm using jargon, I apologize. Product and business capabilities, so kind of getting a view on what the system is supporting in terms of your product. And then event storming I tend to use for understanding the interactions, so the flow of data and the process through those product areas, both online and offline. You'll probably find 4 different sources of information, all that contradict each other. Good luck. You might be using Confluence, you might have somebody who's left and has hidden Word docs somewhere. It's a bit like being Indiana Jones if you're going to try and figure out stuff this way, but it will be helpful to you in the long run. Tests, linked to documentation. So a lot of this I would also do if I was doing a PR, but do the test run. Do they run consistently? So are they flaky? Are they not? What's the quality of the test? I'm not going to get into a soapbox rant here, but assert true equals true is not a test. So just checking that the tests are actually testing something. You'd be surprised how often I've gone into a code base and they're not. Types of test, integration tests, yay. No, this is the various different types that might be there. So are there unit tests, are there integration tests, are there smoke tests, what are they testing? What is covered? Whether those tests are automated or manual. If they are manual, you'll probably find some documentation around them, and maybe you want to automate them. Might be something to put on the backlog. And the processes of when they are run. So are they run as part of PR? Are they run only on deployment? Yes, that does happen. Are they run manually by the engineers as well? Getting an idea of how frequently these tests are run and as what part of the process. If you're lucky as well, the tests might also work as documentation. So if they're well written, you'll be able to get an idea of what the code is doing by reading the tests. Again, entire different talk by itself, but happy to discuss that at any point. Pipelines and processes. Again, do they run? I know it sounds like a silly question. There's two worst case scenarios I've worked in this. I've worked in teams where they haven't actually run a deployment pipeline for 4 years on a service. Digging into it, it was because they were frightened that if they actually deployed to production, everything was going to break. So they've been deploying right up until that point and then going, it's met our definition of done. Yay! We deployed it, everything broke. But it's fine because we figured out how to roll it back before we deployed it, and then we fixed forward from there. But yeah, do they actually run? Have they been run? When were they last run? 4 years is the worst case scenario. I have also been in a team where they haven't run their deployment pipelines for 2 years. It does happen, even if you think it doesn't. What's covered in CI, so what tooling is used, are the tests being run as part of it, is there a linter, are there security tests? Again, what is your continuous integration scripts actually doing? Is the deployment fully automated? I can now say I'm old enough, the fact that I've had to do manual deployments. I'm not sure if I should be happy about that or not. But sometimes your deployment might have a little bit of manual deployment, sometimes it's totally manual. Sometimes it's a beautiful mixture of scripts, so it's not just a straight up code pipeline deployment, but they've also got some bash and a little bit of something else in there too, just to keep you on your toes. And then again, your processes for how and when they are run. So what environments are you deploying to, how often are they run, where are they run, when are they run, as part of those processes. Observability, oh, my old friend. Again, entire suites of talks on this, but the main things I would look at in these kind of projects are your logs. So the level of the logs, this can be a really handy thing to tackle early on, because it might be the case that you've got trace level logs in production. A couple of problems with that. One, it can be really expensive to log that much. Two, it's really, really noisy, so if you actually have to debug something, good luck finding the information you need. Three, and that's life or death situations. Hopefully not in our systems, can be the case, but alerts are very similar for us. So if you have alerts going off constantly, that Slack channel or anything else that your alert's being sounded to, it's going to get muted, it's going to get ignored, because who cares? If you have alerts going off when something actually needs to be dealt with, and only then, people pay attention to them. I'll come back to why that's important, but it is. So just assessing the noise and usefulness of your alerts. And then metrics, how are they used? And again, noise and usefulness. So to reference myself, I do have blogs and talks on some useful metrics that you can use in your systems. The one that I tend to go to a lot is for APIs, which is RED, rate, error, and duration. So these are used to make sure that you've got healthy APIs. What's the rate of calls going through? How many errors are you getting? What's the duration of a call? So the response time of a call. If any of those get too high, you've probably got an issue. Nice and easy metrics to use. So how are your metrics used? Are there vanity metrics that are there just because somebody wanted to know the information once and it might be useful? Maybe. If that's the case, it's probably noisy. People are probably ignoring it. And this one I'm going to go into a little bit more depth, which is recent incidents. The reason I'm going to go into more depth about this is because it's going to be one of the most useful bits for your project. So have a look at the incident response. What is the current process? Meet the teams that are involved. It might be your engineers directly. You might have a centralized incident management team. You might have both. Understand the engineering engagement. Is it a case of something is broken, they throw it over the fence, someone hopefully redeploys and it might work? Or is it that they're actually engaged beginning to end on why the incident is occurring, how to fix it, etc.? So understand the end-to-end process of the incident management. What's measured during your incident response, if anything? So common things that come up are time to detect. If you have a lot of metrics, hopefully mean time to detect. This is how long it takes for a problem to be noticed within your system. Time to respond, how long it takes for somebody from noticing it to actually starting to look into it. And then time to resolve, how long it takes from noticing it to actually being able to fix the incident and resolve the problem. Who has visibility of these metrics as well is quite important. Again, if you've got a centralized incident management team, and I have nothing against that pattern, but if they're the only people who are looking at it, they're the only people who care. So do your engineers have visibility? Do your C-suites and product owners have visibility of your incident metrics? And how are these measurements used? So are they regularly checked to see if maybe they've gone up in time or not? Postmortems and root cause analysis, again, I know that these words are used quite interchangeably. So for me, postmortems tend to be a written log. What's happened during the incident? What are the key events that you need to be aware of? And that can be used for a root cause analysis. There's lots of exercises. So 5 whys, fishbone is a big favorite of mine. But this is kind of going through what had happened and when to reach the root cause of the actual incident, but also some ways that you can streamline your process when it comes to the incident yourself to resolve those things faster. And hopefully, if all of this is in place and done correctly, you'll have preventative actions. I say hopefully, because they might be recorded. Yay! How can we stop this thing from happening again? We've identified it. We've written it down in a JIRA ticket. It might be planned and tracked. Just because it's in JIRA doesn't necessarily mean it's going to get planned. Sorry. Might be prioritized. Probably not. And this is a very sore point. Again, we'll come back to why this is important. Preventative actions is very, very, very important for this piece of work though. One of my favorite bits as part of measurement is listening to the teams. Now, this used to be a slide that wasn't quite so polite because this a lot of depth in the prioritization section on why these and how you use them. So have a look at security compliance, medical feature, business KPIs, housekeeping, which is more kind of your scrum ceremonial fix stuff, and other. We'll go into depth with some examples, so that's why I'm glossing over this quite quickly. An example is a notifications product. This is nobody's actually. So you've got your team into a room, they've put up some post-its, and then afterwards you've gone to side. So you might have some personal data and logs, an out-of-date framework. Those will be to do with your security compliance policy needs. Your product owner might want your notifications to be real-time rather than batch for obvious reasons. Or maybe there's a monthly max notification that they want to go out for their service. The test is slow and flaky, and one of your engineers wants to rename a widely consumed library because it's got a spelling mistake in it. Architectural pillars, it might not be cost effective, there might be reliability issues, resilience issues. Business KPIs, so these are the business measures again. It's not cost effective, it kind of overlaps. And the batch is not real time, which is something that they really want to sell, so this is important to them to get done. Housekeeping wise, the team keep getting blocked in test, and the estimates just aren't working for them. You're probably going to have to do some things around how they're organized and the team itself. And then other lack of camaraderie. Steve isn't happy because none of the other devs talk to him, and he's lonely. And he just really wants a team. Honestly, this isn't a real example. Which then comes to prioritization. So you've gone through, you now understand the system and the product to whatever level you can do by doing this. You have some measurements in mind for what success looks like. How do you actually prioritize the work? This is the bit that has little bits of technical in it. Yay. So value analysis, you want to understand the urgency, the impact, and the effort of each of these items that you've identified. Urgency, is there a committed deadline? Is it something that can be negotiated? Impact, this can be related to risk, legislation, so your GDPR, etc. It can be contractual legislation as well, for any third parties that you're working with. User experience, I mean, you want to have a good user experience. Business requirements, you want to make the business happy, they pay your bonuses. The one that doesn't get talked about a lot is effort, so how complex is the work, how much planning is involved, how many dependencies are there to manage. Effort is something that normally comes to the team after everything's been prioritized and planned. I don't necessarily think that's the right way. This then goes into quadrants. You'll have seen things like this before, I imagine. So you've got your do, your plan, your backlog, and your eliminate. Do, things that need to be done in the next sprint or two. So these are things that are high impact, high urgency, so there is probably a deadline against it, or they're high impact and very low effort. You can get a win in, company's happy, but you don't have to do a lot of work to get there. This is where my little categories came in. So your business KPIs might come into this. There's the C-suite are screaming for a thing, it'll take you a day to do it. That's probably something you want to just get done. Show some value, show some impact early with your team. Security and compliance, a big one because of the urgency factor. You probably haven't met your SLAs, you've probably found out that you aren't GDPR compliant, and it's just a matter of time before somebody finds out. And you'll get a massive financial fine. So high impact, but probably should have been done a month ago, put it into do. Plan is your high impact, but the urgency is negotiable or not overly urgent, and the effort again is not high. Kind of obvious, but business KPIs and security and compliance, if that deadline is a little bit shorter, a little bit longer even. Maturity and debt, so these are the things that might have high impact to your business, they might also just have a very high impact to your team. It's something that they're having to deal with. And commercial or feature, so there might be some features that are high impact, not going to take too much effort to do, but you can negotiate with your product owner to go, can you wait a few weeks? What's going to go into your backlog are things that are high impact, not urgent, and the effort requires a bit more planning. This is where the effort comes into play. And things are not high impact, not urgent, and low effort. This one might sound a bit weird. It's a personal preference. So again, business KPIs, commercial and feature, there's going to be things we're asking for that take a bit of planning because they're not as easy as they might have sold it to be. Your architectural pillars, because they always take a bit of planning to decrease costs, improve resilience. It's not something that you're going to learn how to do overnight, sadly. Well, not sadly, it keeps me in a job and keeps me paid, so I'm quite happy with that. Maturity and depth, so again, improving your system, often there's quite a lot of dependencies and you'll need to do some planning with it. Now, the not high impact, not urgent, low effort bit is because back when I was an engineer, I'd have days where I was working on a big project and it would be doing my head in. So I like to have back pocket stories, 1 or 2 pointers where I knew I could just smash out something, feel good about myself, make those tests turn green, and then get back to the really painful work. So I like to have a few of those things in the backlog just to sneak into sprint when I'm feeling a bit rubbish. Most product owners will be happy with you doing this. I would suggest having a few for your team, just for mental health purposes, more than anything else. And then things you don't want to do are low impact, not urgent, and high effort. Sadly, this does mean maturity and debt a lot of the time, and happily, sometimes this means commercial and feature. I shouldn't take pleasure in selling products that an idea that they've sold isn't necessarily the best one, but I do. So this kind of shows you in a very texty slide that how these different categories work for me as I'm doing this prioritization piece. The reason why I say this is quite technical is because you have to have a relatively good technical knowledge to understand the value and impact of these pieces of work. You may need to talk to engineers to understand the effort properly, because if you're an architect like me, you'll probably reductionize a lot of stuff. Happens. The housekeeping are items that aren't necessarily going to be planned in your backlog, but they'll have a high impact for the teams for you to fix them. And the other is typically items that aren't planned, might not be processy, but we like to be good humans, so we want to deal with them. So to go back very quickly to the example that I gave earlier, I will put in my notes from our lovely team meeting and all of the measurement work. And then I'll also add the things I identified as I went through the documentation, the tests, the incident management process, and do the same exercise with those. This gives us quite a solid plan for the team going forward. So to use this example, high impact, high urgency are those security bits that we identified earlier, but also the noisy alerts, and there's probably some incident prevention item that will have huge impact, but doesn't take a lot of work. Sorry. So planning, the tests are slow and flaky. It's not going to take a huge amount of planning, so I'm not going to put it in a backlog, but it's going to have a big impact to the team itself and probably your delivery as well. Your log levels, pipeline improvements, again, another incident prevention item that is a little bit more effort, not as urgent. Those things will also go into your planning, so this is for the next coming quarter or two. Again, these are going to have huge impacts to both your team, but also your delivery pipelines, and I find it actually quite easy to sell to product and business as a whole. It takes a bit of learning, but it's you become a really good marketeer when you're an architect. Backlog, again, you've got those architectural pillars, the resilience issues, reliability issues. You've got some incident process improvements. So that's going to take a little bit of planning because process is always more work than the actual tech stuff. People are hard. I think my boss is watching this. Don't fire me. And then you've got your not high impact, not urgent, low effort, little back pocket things. I know nobody really likes doing run books, but they do make your life a lot easier when you have to wake up at 3 o'clock in the morning and figure out how to redeploy a service. Please, please love your run books. And you've got your reaching monthly max notification. Maybe that wasn't actually a lot of work, and we can just get it in to make the business happy. And I'm sorry, but renaming a widely consumed library because of a spelling mistake, you've got dependencies, it's going to be a pain to get everybody to move to that new library. It's a lot of work. Again, I'm not looking at Stephen because he knows that this is the actual example. It might make your engineer quite unhappy that this isn't going to get done, but it's just not valuable. It's hard to sell. So, sorry, Bob. We're not going to rename that library for you. And then you've got your other bits. So the estimates aren't working. Maybe your team just aren't using estimates right. If your estimates are being used as a time measure or as a stick for why haven't you completed 62 points you did it last sprint, you aren't using estimates correctly. The estimates are for the teams to be able to judge their own velocity, make sure they're not taking in too much work at once. Again, whole different talk and not one for me to do. But This is something that you won't be planning as part of your sprints. It's just something that you're going to have to work with your delivery manager, scrum master, whoever it is that's responsible. The lack of camaraderie, let's just take Stephen to the pub. It's fine. Or a coffee shop, which you probably prefer. But these are some bits that you can do just to make sure that your team has a social Slack. They're chatting to each other. Try and do some things to make work friends. Yay. And blocked-in tests, you're probably throwing over your tests to some poor person who's having to run them or do some manual stuff, and they've got 8 people throwing their work at them with no context, and it's not very fun. So we probably have to do some process changes so the engineers are taking responsibility for their own testing. Again, entirely different talk. But these things won't necessarily be planned in your backlog. It's just things that you're going to have to organize as a team. So in terms of determining that value, urgency, as I mentioned, you've got your service level agreements. So this may involve deadlines. This could be like your security compliance rule has a deadline that you need to meet it by a certain date. Sorry, anyone who's working on PCI v4 at the moment. Contracts, so you may have a contractual agreement to meet. And just talking to product for your urgency. So when they say that a thing needs to be done by tomorrow, find out where that pressure is coming from, find out if it's actually something that's that high pressure, or whether it's just one very important person yelling. Impact, again, penalties, financial, reputational, etc. User experience, because if the user doesn't have a good experience, they probably won't use your product again. Contractual, pretty much what it says on the tin. Business key performance indicators, so is it something that you can turn around to your stakeholders and go, hey, you're really interested in cost, look how much we decreased it. And incident prevention, I will come to that in a moment, but the less you have to deal with incidents, the more work you can plan, is the long and short of it. And then with effort, to determine effort, have a conversation with your team, don't just assume. Is something manual versus technical? Is it something that's manual that could be automated, and then reduce the effort going forward? And find out if there's any pre-existing knowledge about the work that you're doing. This is not, well, we tried that thing, it didn't work, we're not going to do it again. Or we've always done it this way, so it's fine. This is whether they have a pre-existing knowledge of certain patterns that you might be proposing, languages, technologies. And a lot of this is, trust me, Mongo isn't that bad, I promise. So prioritization-wise, you'll have reactive work, which is expecting the unexpected, and proactive, so planning ahead. Your reactive work are the work to deal with those incidents. So something's broken, you're going to have to drop tools and work on it. It might be unblocking other teams for urgent work. Your proactive is the bits that your product owner and business are going to be most interested in. These are the bits you can plan and can promise to do. At the start of these projects, you're probably going to have a really high percentage reactive work, really low percentage proactive work, which means that team that's working on this system, probably not liked that much. And as you tackle these different items of work that we've talked through so far, your reactive percentage should come down, which means that your proactive can go up, and you can start planning things, have a better velocity, be able to show the business how valuable and amazing your team is. Which brings me on to communication. So you've got a number of audiences, and yes, this is very much a people-based talk. Unfortunately, a lot of tech is people. So you've got your stakeholders, both internal and external, your impacted teams, which is the teams that are doing the work that are impacted by the work that's being done. Your dependencies, this might be other specialisms that are also impacted by the work you're doing. Love your infrastructure teams, love your security teams. Senior leadership, so you see C-suite and Exco, and the peers, which are the teams not directly impacted, but might learn from what you're doing, might be interested in it. And each of these audiences care about different things. So your stakeholders care about your measure of progress and your success. The success of the product, more exact. Your impacted teams want to know what the work is, what the impact of that work is. If you're talking about products as well, this is much easier to have a conversation about. And the progress of the work. The dependencies want to know why they should care. So how is it impacting them? What do they need to plan for? What's going to land on their reactive backlog if you don't talk to them early enough? Senior leadership, measures of progress, success, delivery impacts. Are you making us money? Peers, they want to know what they can use. Like, is there something that you've done, you've made a shared library, or you've got a new pattern for your run books, which has really helped you. They want to be able to steal your ideas, and I don't blame them. And for them to be able to do this, you need to show your workings. So this isn't just a show and tell where you go, hey, we saved loads of money. This is showing what work was planned, why you prioritize that particular piece of work over everything else. So that whole long spiel I did in the middle about value, impact, and effort, why are these things chosen? How are you going to achieve the plans? When did you expect to see a measurable impact? So it might be a phased kind of approach. It might be that you're getting different bits of impact at each phase. How can people get updates of the work? This one's still really tricky for me because as much as you can go to a show and tell, somebody's probably on holiday. If you send out a newsletter, the content might not be appropriate for a stakeholder, but it might be appropriate for a dev. So being able to communicate in different formats that's most appropriate for your audience, really important. And plan B if it doesn't go as expected, because you need a plan B, C, probably D, because all of this should be small little experiments of how we think we might make change going forward. Yes, I'm using the word iteration, but we want to be able to test things out, fail fast. Now, I'm not taking away from the fact that prioritizing when everything urgent is hard. And if you're working on these systems, if you have worked on these systems, you know that everything is urgent. Everything is priority number one, which means nothing is. Some of these communication tools, some of these evaluation tools will help with prioritization. And I really hope my boss isn't watching, because this is the bit that he might not like so much. Sometimes you just got to let it burn. And I mean this in two different ways. So there's a difference between saying, no, we're not going to do a thing, and saying, sorry, but we can't do that right now because we're prioritizing these other things because they're higher impact, higher value, etc. Being able to be very clear about why you can't approach a thing, it's great. If you've got one person yelling that something's really important about one thing and a whole team about another, that's an easy prioritization call. Again, it's a very easy conversation to have. The bit that might get me in a little bit more trouble is sometimes you need to let people feel the pain of not doing a piece of work. So if your engineering team are going, oh, we really, really need to prioritize this thing. If we don't do it, like, we won't be able to do other pieces of work. It's going to block us, or it's going to break this thing in the near future, and nobody else cares, don't fix it. Eventually, it'll become enough of a problem for other people that suddenly it will go up in your priority. So being able to scope down to what's important right now, but also being able to play the game a little bit in terms of making things important to other people is important. It never feels good, but sometimes you do have to, instead of just saving people from their own pain, make them realize why you're important as an engineer. And also it really helps you get your bonus later on. So keep it visible, keep it safe. A big part of this work is just being very, very clear with everybody around you why you're doing work, what the work is, and that means that you actually get to do it, which is the hard bit of this job. Yeah, making mistakes, unavoidable. I can't guarantee you a cost-effective 100% uptime system. I can guarantee you something's going to break. Always does. And the important bit with this is that you can't fix the world. This is something I found really hard to learn in my job. I see a system like this, or I see a team, and I just want everything to be better tomorrow. And everything goes on my own shoulders. But it's not realistic. And it will burn you out. It'll make you miserable, you'll hate your job. So instead, concentrate on the things that you can fix. Take in those small wins and go, okay, it's better than it was yesterday. Might not have fixed the world, but I fixed that one thing that I could control. And you can help others as well as yourself by doing this. It's one of the most common conversations I have with lead engineers in particular, is they want to know why they can't fix everything. And they think it's their fault in some strange way. It's not that strange, I'm the same. But you have to help other people acknowledge what they have achieved. There's a brilliant book called Endings. It's not actually a technical book, but I found it very useful for my technical career because it was saying about how people aren't very good at like acknowledging when something's ended and then kind of reflecting on it. I know this is the whole point of retros, but reflecting on it and going, hey, we actually did a thing, this is awesome. And instead we end up in this like treadmill mentality of going, what's the next thing, what's the next thing, what's the next thing? And then after a month going, why am I so tired? It's because you haven't acknowledged what you've succeeded at. So it's important to learn from your mistakes, but it's also really, really, really important, I cannot emphasize it enough, to acknowledge when you've done well. Don't just acknowledge it to yourself. Tell your boss, show the company what you have done, how much money you've saved them, or how much more stable a system is. Show them the impacts of your now product, not your domain. Make sure that other people are seeing your impact as well. That's how you get promoted. Warning though, if you become an architect, all your job is people, so maybe don't do that. And this is the trick. So a lot of this does require a high degree of technical knowledge, but it's also magic to building trust. So as I kind of alluded to earlier, these teams are not going to be your most popular teams in your company. The teams that deal with your pre-loved system probably get a lot of flack, to be honest, because they're seen as having this rubbish system that they never improve. Maybe they're seen as lazy, or maybe they're a bit idealistic. People don't like these teams, as sad as it is. They're my favorite teams to work with. But by able to do these small experiments, this is building trust not only with the company, but also with the team itself. It's very difficult in my role to do this. But it's going in and going, I know that you've had years of being told no, or that this thing won't work, or it's not possible. But let's just try this. If it doesn't work, we'll try something else. Let's just try this, see if it works, and slowly go from there. So small experiments will build trust with both the team, but also the company as you show the impact of these small experiments. The visibility is very important for both of those things as well. So why are you doing things? What is the impact of them? What is the effect at the end? Your measurable results, which we've gone through how you identify those are going to be things that people understand. Like your company understands money. Sad but true. Your engineers understand performance metrics, etc. Great. But being able to talk in a way that shows your measurable results and the impact that you've had in a language that other people understand is what you want to do. You'll have an improved experience not only for your users, but also for your team, because people won't be slagging them off all the time. And also you might find that people actually want to join your team because this work, it's hard, but it's really interesting. There's a reason I keep working on these kind of systems. And also you get more predictable. So going back to that slide, your reactive work goes down, your predictable planned work goes up. And that means Steve can take a holiday. Might not deserve it, but he can take one. So being able to actually plan your work and be able to share that work and show the impact of Steve going on holiday means that he can go away and know that the system's not going to burn. So it is technical work, but it's very based in the experience of your team and your business as a whole as well. Very quickly, recommended resources. I mentioned capability mapping and event storming, so event-driven collaboration. Ian Cooper has amazing talks on this. I pretty much watch them every 6 months to refresh my own knowledge. Cannot rate them highly enough. Domain-driven design, the implementation red book. Much shorter than the big Eric book. I've never made my way through the big famous blue book, sorry. But it has all the content that you'll need in that smaller one. Site reliability engineering and DevOps might seem strange to be on here, but that's actually where I learned a lot of these techniques. The DevOps book is glorious if you're a Lord of the Rings nerd. There's lots of jokes that you'll get. The site reliability engineering book has a lot to do with root cause analysis and postmortems, so if that's something that you want to improve, that series of books is fantastic. Oh, I just went over time, brilliant. So thank you, please do stay in touch. I'll be around for questions afterwards. Hopefully this was of value to you, and if it wasn't of value, I hope at least a couple of the jokes were funny. And thank you very, very much for having me. I need more coffee.
Much. I don't know if there's anybody got any questions they want now, but that's just grab one on the way out. And there are more pastries and fruits and coffee on the way out. So thank you for coming, and we will be in touch with what's happening next month. Cheers.